Good morning, guys, or good afternoon, whether you're joining me from the present or the future. Welcome back to another FutureFight Vanguard video. Today we're going to be continuing on with video 3 of 4, I think, that's coming out today. A lot of videos are coming out today because of Georgia being hit by Hurricane Zeta, and I lost my power and internet and cell service for a certain amount of time, so I'm giving this video to you guys a little bit late. You guys should have gotten this video during the week, but instead you are getting a lot of videos today to make up for that fact. But we're going to be talking about V-BT11 once again, so welcome back to that. And this is the set with Great Nature, Nova Grappler, Nubatama, and Aquaforce. And so basically we're going to be talking about one of the two Great Nature decks that we're going to cover this week, or rather today, with this. So we're going to be talking about the Isabel deck. So this is actually my favorite Great Nature deck to come out of this set, because it is basically a an upgrade on the lottery abilities of Great Nature that they have so far. And it basically just makes it really, really good, and it gives it like an innate front trigger effect with the new Isabel. So let's get right into the deck here already. If you guys haven't already, be sure to subscribe down below and click that bell button so you don't have to miss any future Cardfight Empire content. Also, be sure to like the video, comment down below letting me know your thoughts, and subscribe and click that bell button like I just said. Also, be sure to check out the join button next to the subscribe button if you would like to become a member. There are tons of cool perks down there for you guys to check out, so check those out if that is something that you're interested in. And then also be sure to check out my second channel down in the description below, Let's Plays Animes, which has to deal with anime, animation, and video games. But with that being said, let's get right into the deck today. So, like I said, we're talking about the Isabel deck. So, starting right off with our grade 3s, we're going to be talking about Sage Saint, Mentor of Black Lacquer Isabel. So this is our upgraded Isabel. It has an ability that has far surpassed the ability of the old Isabel, but we still run the old Isabel because she's still a good card. She's just not as good as Saint Sage Isabel. So what Saint Sage Isabel does is she has 3 abilities. The first one is a continuous ability. This says if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you perform both of the effects for every effect that says you perform one of the effects. So for every lottery type skill that you have in Great Nature, a lot of your card effects have them, from Mary Martin to Binoculous Tiger to Lab Lab Daughter. You have a bunch of abilities that have the lottery abilities on them in this deck. And so basically if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, just like the old Isabel, you get to perform both of the effects, which is very, very powerful. And a lot of times, you know, it makes up for the fact that you can mill out a normal unit and then use both effects, and it makes it really, 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 really swole. So then the second ability is when placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle, you can look at the top 3 cards from your deck and put them on top in any order. So this is a really, really cool ability and a really essential ability to the deck, because it actually allows you to A, stack your triggers, and B, it helps you see what you're going to mill. So you can actually control your lottery effects and control which units you're going to lose to the drop zone by milling and doing the effects of your unit. So you can actually plan out an entire turn, and since we're running front triggers in this build, you can actually set up your drive check to be double front, which I think is just absolutely amazing, and it makes it really hard for your opponent to guard your attacks. Then let's talk about the third ability, which also has to deal with kind of front triggers, not directly but indirectly. So during the main phase, you can counterblast 1 once per turn and choose an auto ability with when placed of one of your units and activate it. And then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, all of your front row units get plus 10,000 power until the end of the turn. So what I like to do with Saint Sage Isabel is I like to actually use the Counterblast 1 on itself so that I can check the top 3 again, and then that I do that directly before going into my battle phase for my drive checks, so I know what I'm going to drive check and possibly what I'm going to damage check next turn, because you can set up 3 triggers and go for checking 2 and then can guarantee damage check 1 the next turn as well. So this is very, very good for offense and defense. And if you think that you don't need the offense to attack your opponent, you can just set up the trigger on defensive with putting it in the third of your slot of your cards when you put it back on top. So very, very good. Next up, let's move to 4 Holy Great Sage of Black Shadows Isabel. This Isabel is really good. It has the same first continuous ability as Sage Saint Isabel, which is performing both of the effects. And then the second ability is when placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle. Soul Blast 1 and put the top card of your deck into the drop zone, and then you can perform one of the effects below depending on that card's type. So if you milled a normal unit, then this card gets plus 15,000 power, and if you milled a trigger unit, then you return the card put from your deck into the drop zone to your hand. So basically, if you milled out a PG, if you milled out a front trigger, if you milled out a heal trigger, you put that card to your hand. If you milled out a normal unit, it gets plus 15k power. Now, however, if you are on either Isabelle and your opponent's on grade 3, when you activate this skill, you get to add 15k to Isabelle and add whatever card you milled to your hand, which is really, really good for advantage sake. Next up, we run 2 Daring Scientist Mary Martin. So what Mary Martin does is on Vanguard's rear guard circle when placed, you may Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1, and then put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below depending on that card's type. If you milled a normal unit, your opponent cannot intercept until the end of the turn. And then if you build a trigger unit, you retire all your opponent's rear guards in the same column as Mary Martin herself. So something that I wanted to mention as well with going to Mary Martin is, as you guys can see here, a lot of our lottery abilities of the deck actually have a real cost. So Mary Martin is Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Binoculus Tiger is Counter Blast 1. Lab Lauder is Counter Blast 1. Bessem Ringtail is Counter Blast 1. So a lot of reasons why I don't want to use Saint Sage Isabelle's third ability on a unit with a real cost is because you still have to pay the cost. You don't just get to activate it for free. So you basically activate it and you still have to pay the cost. I'm pretty sure, at least. So basically, Mary Martin's there to help control your opponent's board, help retire some pesky units that you don't like being on the board, such as Luard's grade 1 in the back row that allows them to intercept with their grade 1s that are in the front row. You can also destroy their grade 1 that is in the front row, so you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And yep, that's just, you know, what Mary Martin is good for. Moving on to our grade 2s, we have 4 Binoculus Tiger. So 4 Binoculus Tiger, this card's been a staple in the Great Nature deck ever since Great Nature got released, and it's just because this card is so good, and we actually have a grade 1 version of this card, kind of, in the form of Bessem Ringtail now. So now this deck has double the Binoculus Tiger, and which means that it's double the good. Like Six Flags says, more flags, more fun. But let's talk about Binoculus Tiger's skill. Is Vanguard Rearguard. When it attacks a Vanguard, you may Counter Blast 1 and put the top card of your deck into the drop zone. So you mill 1, and then you perform one of the effects below depending on what that card's type is. So if you mill a normal unit with Binoculus Tiger, you get to draw a card. And if you mill a trigger unit, then you get to choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire it, and then 3 of the units in your front row get plus 5,000 power. So can definitely help you out during the battle phase, especially if you're on, you know, Sage Saint Isabelle or Holy Great Sage Isabelle, and your opponent's grade 3, then that means when you activate Binoculus Tiger for Counter Blast 1, you get to draw a card, retire one of your opponent's cards, and get plus 5k to 3 of your units, and that's just very efficient for Counter Blast 1. It's amazing. Next up, we have 4 Lab Daughter. What Lab Daughter does is when placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle, you may Counter Blast 1. If you do, put the top card of your deck into the drop zone, and then perform one of the effects below depending on that card's type. So if you milled a normal unit, you get to call it to Rearguard circle, and if you milled a trigger unit, then this unit gets plus 15,000 power. So it's kind of like an opposite version of the old Isabelle. And like I said, if you're on the grade 3 Isabelles and your opponent's grade 3 or greater, you get to activate both effects, which can be very good for your advantage. Lastly, for our grade 2s, we run 3 Barcode Zebra. Barcode Zebra is basically just there to take advantage of how many times that we mill in a turn. So every single time that we mill in a turn, Barcode Zebra gets plus 5,000 power because its skill is on the Rearguard circle. When a card is put into your drop zone from your deck, this unit gets plus 5,000 power. So every single time that you mill, Barcode Zebra gets stronger, which is basically just really good for making really big columns, especially with the fact that you gain 10k to your front row from new Isabelle, and then you check some front triggers on top of that, and it can make your whole columns across the board really hard for your opponent to guard and really hard for your opponent to deal with. Moving on to our grade 1s, we have 4 History Scientist Bushbeck. So what Bushbeck does when you place it on the Vanguard circle is you can discard 1 card from your hand and draw a card. So this is useful for if we go second and we have a quick show ticket that we would like to discard, basically just getting an additional card to our hand. And then at the end of the battle that it boosted, you may retire this unit, and then one of your rear guards gets plus 10,000 power until the end of the turn. So this can again be used to make some final turn plays against your opponent, meaning that the attacks that come after the attack with Bushbeck are going to be stronger because they're going to get power. Next up, we have 4 Diligent Assistant Mini Belly. This is basically just our top 5 for a grade 3 searcher in this deck, and it has an additional rearguard ability. So the additional rearguard ability is a continuous rearguard ability during your turn. If a unit is in your additional rearguard circle, then this unit gets plus 5,000 power. So very, very simple. If you have a unit on your Accel circle, boom, it gets plus 5,000 power. It can become a 13k attacker or booster, which is very solid. Then its second ability is when placed from hand, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 grade 3 card from among them, put into your hand, shuffle your deck, and if you put a card, then you have to discard a card. And since we run 10 grade 3s in this deck, then it makes it a higher chance that we're actually going to get Mini Belly off, which is wonderful. And then last but not least, for our grade 1s, we run 4 Besom Ringtail. This is the card that I'm saying is kind of like the new Binoculus Tiger, but it's slightly worse in my opinion. So basically when it attacks or boosts, you can counterblast 1. Well, actually, I will not say that's worse than Binoculus Tiger. I'll say that's equal because it activates on attack or boost. So you can have this card attacking or boosting as long as it's participating in the battle. It'll be able to use its skill. So that's very cool, and that makes them equal. So when this card attacks or boosts, you may counterblast 1, mill the top card of your deck, and then perform one of the effects below depending on that card's type. So if it's a normal unit, then you draw 1 card, and if it's a trigger unit, you choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire it, and this unit gets plus 5,000 power. So unlike Binoculus Tiger, it doesn't give plus 5k to 3 units, it only gives plus 5k to itself, which is something that you guys should be aware of. Then we're running, for our grade 0s, 1 Beginning Hyrax, which is our starter for a standard that everyone has, which basically when rolled upon, draw a card. And then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 1 or greater, you may put a quick shield ticket into your hand. So obviously, you know, we have discard costs in this deck, such as, you know, Mini Belly. So if you have, you know, on grade 1 or Bushback as well, if you go second and you create that quick shield ticket and you want to discard it for one of these cards' abilities, you are more than welcome to, because it will probably serve you better than in that way than for actual shield. Moving on to our triggers, we have 8 front triggers, 4 draw and 4 heal, 3 alarm chicken, 3 Casanot donkey, 2 correction chinchilla, 4 cable sheep, and 4 insurance doctor care bath. So we run a lot of front to this deck because of how well they synergize with the Great Nature deck in general, and then with Sage Saint Isabel, with being able to stack front triggers on top of your deck is so powerful, and it can end the game out really fast against your opponent. So now we're loading up our games. So we're loading up Isabelle game 1. So we're playing against Kagero, as you guys can see here in the first game. Seems to be we're playing against like some variant of the cross with Strike-In, like a Strike-In variant. So our opponent rides Airmo. We ride into Bushback. We discard a card, which we discard our Quick Shield and draw a card. We get another Bushback. We attack Vanguard, we no guard. Our opponent no guards and gets no trigger while we get a front. Our opponent rides Strike-In and cannot attack, so our opponent ends his turn. And then we ride Binoculus Tiger. We call out Zebra and we call out Bushback. And so then we attack for 17. Our opponent takes it, gets no trigger. And so then we attack for 17 again. And then our opponent blocks it with Rashoska from hand. Then our opponent is forced to ride Dragonic Overlord the end, which is pretty unfortunate for him. However, he does get use of Strike-In skill to be able to get it plus 5k. And I believe a drive check or a crit or something like that. I believe it's 5k and a crit. So basically he plays a bunch of rear guards. And he plays the additional card down just so that he can be at that 4 card requirement when he's done. So we damage check 2 and we get a front trigger, and then he restands and attacks us again. He does get a crit, which deals us 3 damage, which is absolutely kind of devastating. So that's kind of dangerous. And then we block with our front trigger for our last thing. And then we ride into Old Isabelle, going Accel 2 to draw a card. And then we use Isabelle's skill to Soul Blast 1 and mill a normal unit. And because our opponent's grade 3, we get 15k and we add the Sage Saint to hand. And then we call out 2 Binoculus Tigers. We use Besom Ringtail when Vanguard attacks to mill 1. And then basically we draw a card, choose one of our opponent's rear guards, retire it, and it gets plus 5k. So we attack for 40. And we check a front trigger and nothing for our second check. Our opponent checks a draw trigger on defensive. We go into Binoculus Tiger. We retire his grade 1, and 5 of our units get plus 5k. But Barcode Zebra gets plus 10 every time it's used, because you're getting 5k from Binoculus and from Barcode Zebra itself. And then we attack for 57, and our opponent takes it. Then our opponent rides into the cross. puts the Force 1 marker on the rear guard, and then calls out a Dragonic Gaius and a cross on the rear guard circle. Then our opponent uses the skill of the cross to put a Dragonic Overload the end into the soul. And then he attacks us for 23 to start off with. We guard with a heal trigger and an intercept for a 2 to pass, which he does not get. He gets no triggers. Then our opponent counterbluffs discards 3 first and restands with a +10. Attacks us for 33, which we proceed to guard for a no pass. And then our opponent counterbluffs 1, soul blasts 1, and restood and attacks us for 41. And we basically had to think about this one because of the amount of shield that we had in our hand. And basically what we end up doing is we end up guarding with a heal trigger. And then guarding for a no pass as well. Because we could have no passed the other column as well. So we guard with 2. And then we ride into the new Isabelle, getting Accel 2 and drawing. And then we check the top 3 cards with Isabelle. So as you guys can see, we set up our top card of deck so that we are able to use 1 lottery effect. So we use a lottery effect to mill out Isabelle. Isabelle gets Isabelle. And Barcode Zebra goes up in 5k by 5k. And we just placed these Lab Lab Daughters not using the skill because we knew that we were going to check double front. And we were going to play the Mini Belly too, but it would have changed the top card, so we chose not to do that. And then when we attacked with Vanguard, we checked double front. And yeah, that ends up being super game. As you guys can see, our opponent said lucky you, but we set it up to be that way, so it's not really luck. And then even if our opponent was able to heal here, he still would have had to deal with a 62k attack, a 52, a 39, and a 44. Not to mention if I use Bushbeck's ability to give one of my columns plus 10k. So regardless, it was still too much for our opponent to deal with, and therefore our opponent just bit the dust. But loading up Isabelle game 2 here, we're playing against Kagura once again, the same guy. So he came back for the salty run back. We ride Mini Belly, check top 5, and don't get a grade 3. Our opponent rides into Dragonic Gaius, and then plays Airmo in the back row, attacks us for 16, or 19 rather. Then we call out Binoculars Tiger, call out Besom, and call out 2 Barcode Zebra. And I was basically hoping that I hit a front when I checked the trigger here, but I did not, unfortunately. But then our opponent didn't hit a damage trigger, so we're able to just push through 2 attacks and make him guard 1. Then for grade 2 turn, our opponent rides Striken, so he can't attack our Vanguard. He does play Ignorode, looking at the top 7 for a Dragonic Overload the Cross, and he adds it to hand. And then he plays down Airmo and uses Cannon skill, counterboss 1, destroy one of my Zebras, and then he draws a card. And then he attacks our rear guard for 10, and attacks our Vanguard, which we wanted a damage, so I just let him have it. We went into Accel 2, and we mill 1, and then because it is a trigger, we added it back to our hand. And then we use a Lab skill to call out the Isabelle. Isabelle looks at the top 3. And then we play down a Mary Martin just to make use of whatever triggers that we saw off the top. And then we checked a front trigger. So then we attack our opponent for 22, for 24, and then for 30. And our opponent takes all that damage, so he goes to 5, which is obviously going to make any future turns kind of hard / impossible for him to block. But our opponent goes into the cross, uses the cross ability, and then plays the Dragonic Gaius as well. And then he also plays another Torrid Cannon, or he takes the Torrid Cannon back. So his Vanguard, yeah, he basically uses the skill because he forgot. And then he attacks us for 28. We no guard. Our opponent checks no triggers, so we take 2 damage. And one of them is a draw trigger, which is wonderful. So we give power to Vanguard, we draw a card, which obviously makes his the cross easier to guard. So he attacks for 2 crit with 38. And we block this for a 1 to pass, I believe I did. and he doesn't get it. So then he counterblast 1, soul blast 1, and restands again, and then attacks for 46 this time. And I one to pass it again, and he got a crit trigger that time, so he put it through, and we ended up dying that time. So basically what we had to bank on is that he didn't hit that one to pass, and then he wouldn't have been able to hit with this, but he would have been able to attack with this. And then we could have just blocked it, gone into our next turn, and then it would have been impossible for him to survive the next turn. But now we are loading up Isabelle game 3. So now we're playing in Shadow Paladin. This is Luard that we're fighting against, so good practice. Luard's also going first. So our opponent rides Nice, looks at the top 7 cards to get a Luard. And then for turn, we ride into Bushbeck. We discard our Quick Shield and draw a card. And then we attack, we get a Sage Saint Isabelle. Our opponent rides Maka, which is interesting. I've never seen Maka really be used in a Luard build. But then we ride Binoculus Tiger, we call out Zebra, and we call out Lab Lab Daughter. We use Lab Lab skill. We mill out a PG, so it gets plus 15k. Then we use Mini Ability to check top 5, and we don't get anything. So we attack for 14, then 17, and then 24. So our opponent guards all that. Our opponent's all about the early guarding, I guess. So our opponent goes into Dragheart Luard, putting the Force Marker to rear guard, and then using Luard's skill to put 2 of his grade 1s back. And then goes into Drag Driver, uses Drag Driver skill to counterblast 1, and he gets 2 grade 1 units. So he gets the Hardship Sage Decron, so that his grade 1s can intercept. And then he goes for Sharon so that he can countercharge. He goes into battle phase, attacks us for 46. And he proceeds to check no triggers. So damage trigger, we get a heal. We do a heal down, and then he attacks our rear guard, which I don't know why he did that, because we really don't need it. We go into Isabelle, we check the top 3 cards, and we put cards back so that we can kind of predict our mills this turn. So we use grade 3 Isabelle on the rear guard to mill out this Bessem Ringtail and get it back. Then we call out another Isabelle. We use another Isabelle skill to mill Bushbeck, which we get back, and it gets plus 15k. Then we call 2 Bessem Ringtails. And then we're going to use our final Isabelle skill for counterblast 1 on herself, looking at the top 3, and we're getting a, we have a heal and a draw trigger stacked up, and our front row gets plus 10k. So we attack for 35. We get a heal trigger, giving the power to our rear guard, and then a draw trigger, giving the power to our rear guard. We attack for 42, our opponent takes it. We attack for 45, our opponent blocks it. And then we attack for 47, our opponent takes it. So now we're at 0 damage. You know, we have a good amount of shield in hand, so Luard can't really possibly kill us. So he rode Drag Driver from his hand and calls down the appropriate amount of grade 1s. His Souls here both get 15k. And then his Vanguard gets plus 15k. Or plus 25k. Then he attacks my rear guard for 20. Which I let it go, because, you know, any of my rear guards can be a threat with front triggers, so I just let rear guards go. He used Morfessa to counterblast 1, bring back Nice, and it made me retire 1 with Nice, which I easily just retire 1 of my front rows. He does heal down a damage, but we do get a front trigger. And then he attacks my rear guard Lab Lab. Again, I let it go, and then he attacks us for really big with his Souls column. 2 crit, and we take it. 2 damage. So then we ride a new Sage Saint Isabelle. We use Sage Saint Isabelle to look at the top 3 cards so that we can kind of predict our mills. So we play Barcode Zebra. Then we use Isabelle's skill to mill out a Binoculus Tiger, which we get back. And then we use Lab Lab here to mill a normal unit, and we call that Lab Lab, and this Lab Lab gets plus 15k. And then we use Isabelle Vanguard on herself, so looking at the top 3. And we have 1 front trigger stacked on top, and then we also give 10k to the front row. So we attack him for 35. Our opponent guards for a 2 to pass, which we know that we're not going to get. And that's another good thing about this deck, is if you have the 2 to pass set up, and your opponent 2 to passes you, you can just easily bypass it by all Vanguarding, even if you know, you're about to get it. So then your opponent is just waste shield. So then we attack with the rest of our attacks that turn, and our opponent just can't handle it because the attacks are too big and the shield in his hand is too low. But that has been the final game for the Isabelle FutureFight Vanguard video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like on the video. Comment down below letting me know your thoughts for the build and something that you have planned for the build, whatever that may be. And be sure to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't have to miss any future content. Also, be sure to check out Let's Plays Animes in the description down below, my second channel. And check out that join button if you would like to become a channel member, where we offer a lot of different membership abilities for you guys to have. But with that being said, this has been the V-BT11 Isabelle Great Nature video, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on the last of 4 videos for today. Peace, guys.